Of the confetti cake, I'm making 4 6-inch layer cakes. So that's going to be about 14 ounces of batter in each pan. I like using a scale to measure out the batter so they're all equal amounts. They're going to be the same height, and that helps them to bake even too. And for the third version of the confetti cake, I am doing a 4-layer 6-inch cake. So I baked my cake layers, same cake batter. It was about 14 ounces of cake batter in each of my 4 pans. Then I baked it at 325 for about 30 minutes. From the picture, this one has sprinkles in the buttercream, which can make it a little tricky to smooth out and frost your cake, but don't worry, I'm gonna show you how to do that. I am gonna make a little extra buttercream because I want to put some swirls on the top. So when I wanna do some piping, I usually 1.5. This cake, I have red, orange, and yellow sprinkles. I put this in the cake batter too. So it's an easy way to theme your cake or to kind of match the decor of your party. But these are the colors of the Utah Jazz City jersey. And this cake is actually going to one of the players for their birthday. So this is how we're going to theme it, is with our sprinkles. So I'm adding about 1/4 cup of sprinkles into my buttercream, and then we'll save some for a little bit on top, and we'll also be doing the drip. Okay, time to stack and decorate this cake. My cake layers are chilled, which is, I find, the easiest way to work with them. You don't get as many crumbs coming up into the frosting, and they're just easier to handle. So if you remember from our last video, we did the 3-layer 8-inch cake with the chocolate frosting. This one, we're doing the 4 layers, and I'm gonna apply the buttercream and kind of all the stacking all the way to the crumb coat the same way we did with the chocolate cake. So I know you've watched that video. I'll speed through this process, and then we'll slow down and talk about how to do the outside with an acrylic disc, which will help us get really sharp sides and straight edges, or other way around, sharp edges, straight sides. We'll use the cake scraper, and we'll talk about all those sprinkles that are in our buttercream. So let's get to it. Before I do the crumb coat, I just wanted to give you a little tip that if you feel like your cake is a little wobbly, grab a straw, and we're just gonna create a little dowel just to secure it. And then you're gonna cut the top of the straw just to the top of the cake, place that in. That will hold it a little bit better so it doesn't wobble too much. So my cake has been frozen for just a little while to set the crumb coat, just like we did with the chocolate buttercream. Now, on this one, we are gonna try to get straight sides and a sharp edge. So I'm gonna use my acrylic disc. This is from my shop, shop.cakebycourtney.com. And it's acrylic, it's a disc. It's as simple as that, but it's a little bit bigger than the cake itself. So it helps us kind of go past the board on the bottom. So it's this one's 6.25 inch. And it comes in a set with another one for 8.25 inch. So I just use one on top, and I put it right on top of my frozen or chilled cake. So there's a little extra room. And then the goal is we're gonna go from this line. So I'm not adding a ton of buttercream past this part of the acrylic disc. It's like 1/4 inch extra here. We're just gonna bring that line all the way down. So it helps us kind of just guide and get some straight edges. And then we chill the cake again. Now I'm just making sure this looks like it's totally straight. If you don't have one of these, you do not have to try to go grab one immediately. You can also use another 6-inch cake board. That sometimes helps, or just freehand it without the disc. So I'm going to just make sure it looks nice and level here. And if you are using a disc, you're just going to start adding that buttercream right underneath the disc. But if you're not using the disc, just go ahead and start to frost the outside of your cake with your buttercream, and it has the sprinkles in it. And what that means, we're gonna be able to get smooth sides even with the sprinkles. We just have to have a really light touch. So when you're adding buttercream to the sides of your cake, you really shouldn't ever be pushing too hard. And if you feel like, oh, you're pushing so hard to get that buttercream to smooth out on your cake, then the buttercream consistency is probably too dense, and we need to put it back in the mixer and let it beat for just a little bit longer so it lightens up the texture and makes it easily spreadable. So I'm going around the top half first, and then I'll start going around the bottom. Now, I'm never too worried about how my crumb coat looks. Like, my cake was a little uneven, but this is where we start to even it out, and we can cover up that crumb coat that may not look as beautiful as we were hoping. So now I'm gonna do the bottom half. I'm using my straight icing spatula on the sides again. And then I have my offset I'll use in a little bit. My buttercream is on the side of the cake. And I always get eye level just to make sure it looks pretty straight, even though it's really messy looking, before I use my scraper. So I showed you this one in the last video, but I didn't use it. So we want to start with a clean scraper. This one is a lightweight, very thin aluminum, and I've got it coated with my rose gold. This is in the shop as well, but it's very lightweight. So no matter what scraper you get, I recommend it should be thin and lightweight, and it should be a metal, because I personally don't love the plastic ones or the acrylic ones as much. I find my American buttercream just smooths out really well with this. So I'm holding it kind of right here in the middle, and my hand is applying pressure everywhere, but I am not gripping it. Can you see the difference? Like, there's tension there in my hand, and then I'm just gonna kind of loosen that up, and it should be a really light grip. Now, I've got my turntable. My goal here is I want to keep this edge right here looking nice and straight, and I'm going to use the acrylic disc at the top as a guide. So this is also really awkward, and I have lots of video on IGTV and my YouTube page on kind of my method. I like to go in like one big round circle so that I only have the one scraper line in the back of my cake. So think of your arms and the turntable like a clock, and I'm over here at like 1 o'clock, and my left hand, my free hand, is doing all the work, and then they cross over at about 4 o'clock. All right, so one time around, and right now I'm kind of just starting to even out my lines. And that was probably the most buttercream I'll take away from the cake while I do this, because I'm just trying to really even things out now. And if you feel like it's super off, you can always just kind of patch it up. You know, it's a little spackling. But as you go with the light touch around the buttercream, what's gonna happen is we're gonna smooth out the buttercream, but if we're using a light enough touch, we're not going to pull away at the sprinkles that we have in this buttercream, and they're just gonna stay nice and blended. So if you're doing this and all of a sudden you're seeing like lines created, indents created from your sprinkles, it's because you're pushing too hard. So look, I'm not even taking away that much buttercream because I've started to even it out. So I really don't need to take away too much. But again, the key is a light touch. If we're pushing too hard, oftentimes we create like the holes in our buttercream. And I actually feel like I've got a little too much buttercream on here. So I'm gonna push hard for a second just to even out this one side. It's going quite a bit past my acrylic disc, and we don't need that much. So I'm trying to get it in line with that disc and going straight down. Now, it's important that when you're scraping, you're using the right angle. So we do not want to be perpendicular, and we don't want to be super, super close. We just want, think about like a 1/4 inch of your scraper to be touching the cake. So when you're looking at it, it should be about a 45-degree angle as you're scraping. Now that the buttercream is on the side of the cake, I still have the acrylic disc on. I'm actually gonna freeze it one more time for about 10 to 15 minutes to set the buttercream, because then I just cut the acrylic disc away and I get this like great, sharp, professional looking edge to the cake. So while that goes into the freezer, I'll show you how to make the drip. Okay, so let's talk about this white chocolate drip. Consistency is key. So I'm starting with about a 1/4 cup of heavy cream that I've heated and 1 cup of my white chocolate chips. Now, the chocolate chips will make a difference, the white chocolate chips. These, you see how white they are? This is Guittard White Cookie Drops. I get them at Orson Gigi. These guys ship, but they're really white in color, which is gonna make a difference. If, like the biggest difference, if you want a white drip. This is just a great brand, it's a good quality. But with white chocolate, it's just so much more finicky than any other chocolate really. And so what we wanna do is heat the cream and let the cream heat up the white chocolate. Don't try to heat them together. Your white chocolate will seize. Now I am gonna add some orange to this, and I'm gonna use just the Americolor food gels. Love those. And because we've got the cream in here, kind of creating a barrier to the chocolate, don't worry about the chocolate seizing because we're using a water-based food coloring. You are gonna be a-okay because we're not using that much. So now that my drip has been melted, can you see how smooth it is now? Great consistency. If you feel like yours is too thick, that's when you'd want to add some more warm cream to the mixture to thicken it up. But remember too, as it sits out and cools down, because we don't want it piping hot going onto the cake, it's gonna thicken just a little bit. I am gonna use a little drip bottle. So this is from Gigi as well. I usually just cut the top a little bit to make the mouth of the bottle a little wider. But you could also use a piping bag and use this for the drip. You can spoon it off the sides of your cake. So a lot of different methods. If you don't have all the same tools, we can still get a great looking drip. Okay, so that's my drip. I've got my, my colored sprinkles there, my drip to match. All right, I'm gonna grab my cake. We'll take the acrylic disc off and do the drip. So now my buttercream is set again, and we're going to just cut off the acrylic disc. So taking just a little knife here, and I'm gonna slide it right underneath the disc, and I'm applying more pressure like to the top of the disc, and I've just gotta kind of use my hand over here to move it around. But just be careful of your hand, and we're just cutting away the disc. Now, if you feel like your buttercream is cracking while you're using the disc, it's because it's been in the freezer too long, and so it's breaking apart. It should come off pretty easily without like much buttercream. I'm just gonna add a little bit more buttercream to the top. I've already got it in my piping bag that I'll be using in just a minute. Now we're ready for the drip. So we are gonna make sure this isn't too hot. Feels about room temperature now, which is just perfect. And I always like to start in the back of my cake. So just find a spot that you think is kind of your back. And we're gonna hold the bottle at an angle. And I like to do just kind of one drip first so I can see what it looks like and how much pressure I need to apply. So we're gonna just squeeze it like so it starts on top of the cake and then spills over like a waterfall. So applying pressure, let's just kind of see how far that drips and if we're gonna need to put a little bit more. But if your cake is kind of chilled like this, it is gonna help it to kind of set before it goes all the way to the bottom. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple more and then just pull back a little bit with the piping bottle on areas that you don't want the drip to go down the cake. Don't hold your breath for too long while you're doing it. And you can't go back over it a second time. So just go for it. It's gonna look great. Okay, can you see that? It's coming down so nice. All right, now I'm gonna add a little bit to the top and use my offset icing spatula to fill it in. Then we'll do some piping and we're done. I've got my piping bag and I have a Wilton 6B piping tip in there. So kind of a star tip. I'm just gonna do little dollops on the top like I have in the picture of this cake. So it's just gonna be holding your piping bag straight up and down. Make sure you twist the top. You don't want your bag too full, so leave about 1/3 of it not filled with buttercream. Twist it, lock your thumb, and then apply pressure with your fingers. Now don't start too close to the edge, otherwise as you're piping it will start to fall off. These little dollops are just so easy. Always be piping like right in front of where you're standing. Push down and then lift. Leave a little space at the edge. And I think it needs a few more sprinkles. Oh, and actually, I think I did a different thing on the edge of the other cake now that I think about it. The one in the pictures. That was a little bit of a wave. Well, either way, have fun with it at this point. There's lots of different like techniques you can do, swirls and braids, but with that extra buttercream we made, you should have enough to decorate the top. And there you go.